The world is on edge as Russia uses its military might in Ukraine. And on the same day this week when China announced it's increasing its military budget by 12%, President Obama announces he wants to slash defense spending here. So, Emac, is that wise?
No, it's not wise. Listen, we all want to cut the waste out of budgets across the board, including defense. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about dramatic cuts in defense spending. Defense spending is not driving the debt crisis in the United States. Its entitlements are. And the problem is we've got North Korea, Iran, improving the range and the payload of their ballistic missiles. We still have Islamic extremists around the world who want to build Sharia states in other countries. And listen, our defense is a force for stability and peace. And I can't take it when people always equate it to China, that we're multiples of China's spending. China's the Enron of government bookkeeping. They mask their defense spending, saying it is space spending.
All right,
right?
John
So that's the problem there.
With all this stuff going on around the world, very dangerous stuff, wouldn't it be a terrible time to slash defense spending?
I don't think so. The reality is that we spend more on defense than the rest of the world combined. And, you know, conservatives talk a really good game about reducing the burden of government and reducing dependency on government. But in promoting a massive military footprint, they are promoting very big government, and they're promoting global dependency on government. The defense spending's got to be slashed, and I would argue it'd make the world a safer place.
All right. Well, Rich, it's clear that the American people don't want to slash defense spending. The latest poll shows by a good majority, 59% oppose cutting number of U.S. Army troops anyway to reduce military spending.
You know, picking between two smart people like Lizzie and John is a real dilemma, but I'm going to go with Lizzie in this one. You look at the 1930s when Britain and the U.S. really downsized their military. It just created the perfect situation for aggression by Adolf Hitler and by Japan and by Mussolini in Italy. You know, these are serious topics. I realize that defense contracting can be very bloated. It's a cost-plus basis, which invites a lot of bloated, you know, packed spending. But we can never, ever, ever afford to lose the military technology race.
And Bruce, it seems like this has happened many times in history before. We get fat and happy and lazy. We think that the world is fine, stop spending money, and all these jerks out there in the world come and take advantage of it, and then we're caught with our pants down.
Well, I think a couple things. First, we got to remember, in an effort to cut spending, we're coming out of two wars here that we're exiting. And another thing, the Obama administration has done a good job. They've reallocated part of our naval fleet to the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean, where we haven't had wars. And I also come from the school of thought from my salad days in the 80s, where if we already have enough nuclear bombs to blow up the world several times over, why do we need any more? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to keep spending on defense like this.
Okay, but Mike, again, it's a dangerous world out there. If we spend money now, perhaps it won't blow out of control.
And you don't have military spending so you can blow up the world multiple of times, David. You do it to protect your country and protect your allies. I'm not as old as my good friend Rich, so I'm not going to go to I'm just going to go to the late 70s and early 80s. When,
Rich, by the way, doesn't remember the 30s. He's read about the 30s.
But I remember when Barack Carter was president, and you know, the economy was totally ruined. And my point here is this: when Reagan came in, he rebuilt the economy first, and under Obama and his redistributionist policies, we have a terrible recovery and a weak economy. First and foremost, you got to rebuild the economy, and that's what Reagan used to bring down the Soviet Empire.
Well, Mike, I love Mike to death, and I never disagree with him until now. Sabrina, the fact is that Reagan dramatically increased defense spending. The spending increases can be seen on various graphs, and I mean, there's just no question that he increased at the same time that he was cutting domestic spending on welfare and stuff like that. He was dramatically increasing the military, and that led to us winning the Cold War.
Right. Well, I think that the term, you know, defense spending is now maybe has adjusted, right? So having a strong economy in many ways, or having a strong information economy is almost as important as having a strong military. But I think putting that aside for a moment, we have very real national security threats, but we can't conflate our military preparedness with government bloat. And the fact is, there are places to cut in the defense budget. I was just reading about the MEADS program from 1995, right? This was a missile program. 15 years later, it was found not to be effective. The Army, the Pentagon, they said, we want to cut this, yet the president put $400 million into the budget for this program. So, I mean, I think that, and we want to make sure that we're not cutting from the defense budget and putting it back into silly.
Well, EMAC, there are places to cut everywhere. There's no question that that you can find places in defense spending. Now, I have full disclosure. I have a son who is a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, so I'm not a neutral observer in all this, but shouldn't we at least keep personnel at current levels?
Yeah, that's the thing that really was the gut punch. The reduction in personnel. And by the way, your son is fantastic, and so is your wife. The thing is that's what was scary, that the fact that the number of our soldiers is going down. And that was the thing that was a real eyebrow-raising moment when we saw that happening. That's when people started to debate, hey, are we making the right decisions here and reducing our defense in that way?
John Tamney, my son, who never lies, tells me, Dad, the Marines don't waste money. Do you believe him?
I believe him that the Marines don't waste money, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot of waste in the bureaucracy. Do we feel safer because we've got troops in South Korea, or safer because we've got them in Japan or Germany? If you want to make the world a safer place, open up trade to everyone around the world. People do not go to war with those they're trading freely with. We spend way too much.
Well, maybe you can do both. Maybe you can increase trade and keep defense spending. We got to leave it at that, Sabrina. Here's another eye-popping revelation. The government says it has no clue about how many uninsured are getting covered by Obamacare. Why, some here say that's another cover-up.